road to Pyeongchang continues in the 2002 Winter Olympic venue. We're in Park City, Utah, 7,000 feet above sea level in the Wasatch Mountains, ready for the start of race 2 of the BMW IBSF Men's Skeleton World Cup. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good middle of the night, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us. I'm Martin Haven, alongside me Bree Schaff. And Bree, this second of the US tracks is very different in nature from Lake Placid.
It could not be more opposite. It is the ultimate gliders track where the start plays maybe one of the most critical roles in a track on tour. So it's very important that you push past the crest before you load your sled. In curve 1 here, 2 and 3, you just need to lay there and think yourself around those corners. If you try and steer, you will break into a skid. Curve 4 in the women's race, we saw a lot of people going late and into a skid there. Curve 5 is what sets you up for curve 6, and you see a lot of people fly up to the lip there if they are late, and that sets you up for the labyrinth. This is the flat portion of the track. If you're off rhythm, you start taking hits, and that will kill your time. Now into one of the bigger corners, curve 11, a classic 2-pressure turn that's going to set you up. It's easy to bump the takeoff and be too early into 12 and 13. We saw a lot of skidding there in the women's race. Curve 14, another giant 2-pressure corner. This is an extremely steep uphill portion that you can lose a ton of time.
Across the line, the start record, Alexander Tretyakov, 2013, he didn't win that race because the track record was set by Martin's Dukurs, who did. But in the last decade, only 3 men have won races here. Martin's Dukurs, Alexander Tretyakov, and US coach Zach Lund. Dukurs won last week in Lake Placid. He leads the World Cup rankings from runners-up Sungbin and third-placed Alexander Tretyakov. And again, we have an enormous field here. It is, of course, the Olympic season. There are 31 athletes ready to start the action here in Park City, 11 of whom will not get a second run. So of those sleds, 1 in 3 and a little bit more won't go again. Checking the temperature of the runners against the control steel. That's in the shade at the top of the track, just to make sure that runners aren't heated. If they were, they would melt the ice fractionally underneath themselves and go a little quicker. There's Axel Jungk, bronze medalist last time we were here. Jack Thomas had a bit of a struggle with his race in Lake Placid. He wants to turn that around here. And there's the man they all have to beat. 49th World Cup win a week ago. Bree Schaff, that's just an astonishing, and that's you know, World Championships and then everything else outside of it. An astonishing milestone potentially he reaches in the next week or two. Well, Reece Thornbury is the first man of 31 off the hill, followed by Norway's Alec Hanson. It's not in reverse alphabetical order. The first 5 are in a random group outside the top 15 in the world, and then from 6th down to 15th are the top 10 in the World Cup rankings. Below there, after you get past Jerry Rice, the remaining 11 sliders are going to have to force somebody out to make their way into the field. Second race of the BMW IBSF Skeleton Men's World Cup. We're in Park City, Utah. Reece Thornbury gets us underway, the first of 31 sleds in the first heat. Martin Haven and Bree Schaff watching the action.
Reece sliding for New Zealand. He was actually released from Team GB. He was a Royal Air Force Elite Athlete Program member and then lost 10 pounds over the summer getting into sliding shape for Olympic season.
Yeah, last year was his first full season in the World Cup after some sporadic appearances.
Right, and that's kind of the nature of that Air Force program, is those athletes weren't able to commit fully, which is why Team GB let them go.
He is still in the Royal Air Force, works at Bryce Norton in Oxfordshire. He's a weapons technician, or a bomb head, as it's known in the trade, which is pretty handy when you're going head first at 70+ miles an hour. 81.3 at the bottom of Albert's Alley, and up to the line, 49.30. Now the track record here is 48.58. In the women's skeleton race, as in Lake Placid, we saw the start record ripped up and tossed into the wind by our Russian rocket, Elena Nikitina.
Now, I would love to give Reece the credit of saying he had a fantastic run, but I'm willing to bet that the track record could go down today with these beautiful conditions and with Reece putting down a run like that.
Could well be. The gorgeous Norwegian coloured helmet and race suit of Alex Hanson. I was talking to Deanna Panting, who runs the Quick Skins company the other day, a former Olympic skeleton slider, and she said, look at him there in his headshot. She said, we couldn't get a better model on him. He's got the body, and he just looks like Thor in a race suit.
Well, and he won the major competition of last year, which was the hair competition. If you remember correctly, John Daly was beat out by Alex Hanson, and in just the biggest upset, maybe of Daly's career.
Yeah. 4.66, a good getaway. That's a little quicker than Reece Thornbury. And these two guys outside the top 10 in the world, they're looking to break into the top 20 in this first heat to guarantee a second slide.
Now, already we're seeing Alex skid. Alex is extremely athletic, really late into curve 6 there. I trained with Alex in Arizona with Stu McMillan, who he still trains with, and his start reflects that, but he still struggles with maintaining sliding form. Big skid into curve 11 here. We're just bleeding time all the way down the track.
He hasn't done a full World Cup season yet, so he's still very much on the way up in terms of building that knowledge bank. 9/10 back. And he's in second place at the moment to the two sliders, but this is going to see him really struggle to make the field, I'm afraid, in the second heat. 1.5 seconds slower, 50.82. I think we can say now, Snorre Pedersen, his coach, Maja Pedersen's husband, I think we can say that Alex Hansen is highly unlikely to make the second heat. The track is likely only to get quicker as the air temperature gradually creeps up from the -10, 11 overnight low.
Now, watch his turnover. You can see how powerful he is, but then unfortunately, all the way down the track, when you see the runners kick out like that, the spine on the back of those runners is now cutting along the ice, and over the course of a mile, just continually slowing him down.
Athlete and sled weighed to make sure they're neither too light nor too heavy. Next up is Spain's Anna Mirambel, one of the athletes coached by Martin Rettel. There's Rettel with the sled. He was the 2001 world champion in men's skeleton and 2002 on this track, the Olympic silver medalist, so he knows a thing or two about how to get speed on Park City's ice.
Andrew and I started skeleton around the same time, and he was telling me that he had a great season last year because he kicked it off with 2 America's Cup wins, and for him, that was such a mental advantage. It was the first time that he could start a season with that much confidence, and it just gave him a ton of momentum going forward.
Yeah, nothing like winning to really build your confidence, and he and Maria Montiano with a group of others, Kim Marmans of Belgium, being coached by Martin Rettel, swapping notes amongst each other. Suddenly these almost individual nation athletes are a clump, and you know, all that information, and with Reece Thornbury, all gets pulled together. So last year was by far and away his best in the World Cup, and he needs to try and build on that here.
He's currently behind Reece by 0.2 of a second.
But he's way ahead of Alex Hansen, and again for him, it's all about making the cut. That is the critical thing. Last year, Ander finished 14th in the World Cup, and only in Pyeongchang, that nobody had ever seen before, did he fail to make the cut. But he feels that, look at that, he feels that was a good slide.
Yeah, I mean, he was training well this week, and for him, it's all about maintaining consistency going towards the games. Vamos!
Okay, so the man who represents Spain is currently lying second. The man who represents New Zealand is our race leader, Jack Thomas of Great Britain. Jack T-Tray Thomas, if you follow him on social media, struggled with the T-Tray last week in Lake Placid. Let's see if it's a little better behaved today. But Bree, it's really difficult for the athletes. The ice is ultra hard, ultra fast, and in training it was, quote, soft, more grippy. It might as well be a different track entirely.
Yes. Martin, this is a sport based on intuition, and so those training runs you get all week are what hone your feel for a track. The problem is they haven't seen cold, hard ice all week long. So when you make your selection of equipment, and you know it's going to be hard and fast, you just have a really hard time maintaining composure and figuring out what you're going to run. Chances are a lot of these athletes are running too loose of a setup, a little bit lack of control that's going to cause them to skid today.
Well, if you can ride a wild sled, you've got a chance here, haven't you? And that's exactly what you need to do. He started a little quicker than our current leader, Reece Thornbury.
Now, Jack is on the team because he met the World Cup requirements, but he actually lost the selection races on the GB team to Marcus Wyatt, an athlete who's doing great on ICC right now.
And in fact, the development program athletes are just slaughtering it
Coached
in
by
ICC and NAC. Yeah. And the Europa Cup athletes are just winning medals almost every time they step up. There's Caleb Smith in a green cap.
well off
third
the
place.
pace. So an interesting aspect of this Olympic season is in these lower ranks. If someone is hovering around the third or second spot on their team, they are subject to being substituted out by someone who's doing well on ICC or Europa Cup, like you were just saying.
Yeah. You only get half the points of a World Cup finish in ICC, but you get 2 shots at it every weekend. So, all right, Jack, well, let's see if that's good enough to get him a second heat. Next up, one of the tallest men in the competition, Reece Graf, the young Swiss. I doubted his claim last week that he was 6'4", so I measured him up against the start house. I was right. 6'4.5". I was wrong. He's not 6'6", but that means that I'm not anymore either.
So you took him to a convenience store and had him walk by the height chart.
I measured him up against the start house here on Tuesday because I didn't believe he was as short as he claimed. 6'4.5". Anyway, there we go.
Jeff Payne, you rarely see athletes tall like that in the sport of skeleton anymore because it tends to be less aerodynamic.
Well, you know that his mother did nothing but feed him growing up. You know, he is like a piece of spaghetti. He is all up and no across at all. And for cheating the wind, that's great. He carries weight, but he's not got huge shoulders, so he doesn't force the air apart so much.
That's his tagline, Reece Graf, well fed. Yeah. And his mother can be very proud. She's done her job.
I'm sure she's not had to cut back the grocery bill by about 75% now he's on tour.
And he is well behind the pace here in the red. 8800s back still by the pace set by Reece Thornbury of New Zealand.
But ahead of Alex Hanson, creeping up in 4th position. Is he going to make it at the line? Yeah, 4th at the line, but 1.3 seconds back again. I don't see that being good enough to make the field.
No, a lifetime in the sport of skeleton, and he was one of the, he came in, I believe, last place in Lake Placid.
Yeah.
So this is an athlete looking for top 20s. We talked about the races within the races, and here, going into curve 11, tagging that wall, that's going to put him late, and he's just struggling to keep that sled straight. Oh, his elbows and his shoulders. So this is when you get anxious and when things aren't going well on a run, that's the steep uphill portion, and his form just really, really degraded there.
Reece Thornbury of New Zealand, the first man on ice, leads 5 of 31 sleds down. 15 spots left in the second heat, 26 sleds trying to get in there. Hi to Nathan Crumpton in the yellow hat, filming at the a winner on this track. And since they took it from Zach Blunt, he and Martin Dukurs flip-flopped time and again with winning and beating each other.
And this is one of those tracks that will be his specialty, especially early on in his career. It was Eagles in Park City where he was able to take home wins because of his massive start. Big skid! Oh, out of 5 there. That's going to cost him some time. Now, he had a big lead. He'll make the top 20, no problem, but he is not going to be battling for medals anymore.
Well, 79.7.
Oh, another big skid. This is all equipment, Martin.
Yeah, 79.7 miles an hour compared to Reece Thornbury's 81.3.
Now he's only 2/10 back, but mind you, he's 2/10 back off of Reece Thornbury. No offense to Reece, but this is not where you normally see Tretyakov.
This is going to be nearly half a second disadvantage. He's 32 hundredths behind Reece Thornbury, started 12 hundredths faster, so he's lost 45 hundredths, and he's only beaten Spain's Ander Mirambel by 6 hundredths of a second. On any other day, if you were 6 hundredths behind Alexander Tretyakov, you'd be looking at medals.
So there's 2 elements coming into play here as we watch the replay. He makes this skid is massive, and it's at the top of the track. So not only does he have that mistake, but now he has the full anxiety rushing in, knowing that he has to make up for that, and it can tighten you up on the sled. Obviously, his setup is a bit too wild for the ice conditions.
Now, the other thing is the Russians are still using coaches and runners provided by Willi Schneider, who they fired over a season ago. So they're completely at sea now without the advice of the sled builder. Not a problem for Axel Jungk of Germany, bronze medalist here the last visit 2 seasons ago. And Axel last year, a bronze medal in Altenburg, was the highlight of what was a bit of a downbeat season for him. And he feels he's faster and stronger this year than he was before.
You know, Martin, I've always thought of ski jumpers as being very slight athletes. Someone pointed out to me this week, you are training from a young age all explosive power. They are jumpers. Just because they have skis on their feet does not take away from that explosive power, and that's what makes this start so great.
It's that explosion off the table on takeoff, isn't it? That's where it comes from. But Axel, another long, lean athlete, packed with power, and he's in the lead, 462. That was only 400 slower than the Russian rocket. That's how quickly he's going at the moment.
Axel has great sliding intuition. I talked to Anja Huber, one of the more famous German athletes. She was coaching on ICC with me. She let me know that he is also a highly motivated Instagrammer.
Yes, he is. He likes the social media. He's 400s behind Reece Thornbury.
Wow!
Reece Thornbury, come on, mate, get out in the, hang around down in the leaders box a bit. This is a great run from him. Axel Jungk in second place.
I would like to go on record with an apology to Reece Thornbury for my comments earlier. He has laid down the time to beat. What a great run for him.
Well, he has, but we've still got a massive field, so who knows what surprises we'll find. This is a good-looking line, but he's working the body hard to get it.
And so what you saw there, he was on the right side of the screen. The curve was going left. That meant he went in late. And when you go in late into a curve, you hit all that G-force at once, and you have to steer even harder.
Rub the wall in the uphill section as well. Not happy with that. So are they just stumbling and failing to catch Reece Thornbury? Now, we've seen one Russian rocket. This is Russian rocket 2, Nikita Tretyakov, another electrifying starter. And a man who can easily threaten the start record. Maybe in the second heat when the ice is a little grippier for the spikes. 4:48 is the all-time mark.
4:63. It's a great start and a beautiful soft load for Nikita. He was a cadet at military school in Russia, and I understand that he really loves fishing, according to Sergei Shubnov, who I forced to switch seats and sit next to me on the flight to come here. They just pumped him for information on all the Russian athletes.
Always a good thing.
Still in the green. We would expect with that start, especially with a clean run, he is going to take over this lead. Oh, it's only 400.
Yep.
I keep eating my words compared to Reece.
And this is where the start advantage runs out. And now he's got to drive better. His speed is not as high. Reece Thornbury was a fraction quicker, half a mile an hour. Not enough. He's going to be behind. No,
Wow.
200s in front.
What a fascinating race we have going here.
Yes, we do. 200ths of a second. Nikita Tretyakov ahead of Reece Thornbury. Axel Jungk in third. 600s back. Alexander Tretyakov in fourth. 34 hundredths back. Wow.
Now watch his load. This is so beautiful. The reason an athlete is going to train that light of a load is you risk popping a groove if you pop onto the sled with any force direction going other than straight.
Well, Nikita Tretyakov looks happy with that, and he should do. He's a full third of a second ahead of Alexander Tretyakov, the senior Russian. Well, has the ice gone away? I doubt it with the really low temperatures we had overnight. It's still sub-zero air temperature, although a track worker in the background is in shirt sleeves. Here's Thomas Dukurs, the elder of the two brothers. Let's see what he can produce. 4:69, again, another good, strong start.
Sixth best start. And watch his feet as he comes down the track. He's a very tall athlete, and he's almost using his height as a rudder there to steer the sled as opposed to pushing the runners into the ice.
Yeah, very similar style from his slightly shorter brother Martin's. A lot of footwork just directing the air, and the head as well.
Oh, beautiful lines here out of Tomas Dukurs. This is how you do the labyrinth. Nice and straight into curve 11. This is what we like to see. Now, the pompous and skeleton is when it's done right, it looks so easy, and that's what he's doing here. 100th.
Here he comes. Speed at the bottom. If he avoids the wall here, and he does, straight up the middle, uphill. This is for the lead of the race by 600ths of a second. Okay, so we've now got 4 sleds together. And this is exactly what we expect to see on this track. Some very, very close racing. It's a short track. It's hard to make a big difference. It's very easy, though, Bree, to give away time.
Especially in that labyrinth section that Tomas showed us how it's done. Now, mind you, Reece Thornbury is still sitting in third, only 800ths back off of Thomas Dukurs. So he took an extra step there on his start. If you notice where his feet were, he stepped with his lead foot, which is typically a mistake.
Well, he was happy with that slide. There's his dad, Dennis, with the sled. And next up is Sungbin of Korea. Again, electrifying starter. Now, the Koreans all started on North American tracks, so he knows these places better than he knows the European tracks. Let's see if he can parlay that and trade up from last time's silver into a gold.
Sungbin has been one of the most exciting athletes.
Oh,
451
300s off the track record.
He has been one of the most exciting people to watch come up into the sport. A little bit of skid and a curve four. Now, believe it or not, Martin, before skeleton, he was just a sports-loving student. He came out to a push camp, and then from there, just had a natural talent for the sport.
Well, that's the story of almost everybody in the US skeleton program. They watched it on TV and came for a tryout.
But he didn't even come from another sport that might have catered to it, like track and field, but he has these incredible starts, which have him in the mix and a serious medal favorite going into these Olympics.
Yeah. If anybody is going to break Martin's Dukurs' heart, he says it might be him. In the lead by 0.4 of a second.
This is the race we were waiting for.
Well, there's only one man who's got the potential to reel in Iron Man, and that is Superman, Martins Dukurs. And the Iron Man reference is a comic book favorite of his. That's represented on Sungbin's helmet.
Now, he has a great feeling for this sport. Watch the power, the ice dust kicking up off his feet, such powerful steps. And a great load. That chest first is ideal. A lot of times you see knees first go down, but that's dangerous. It can risk popping the groove there.
10 sleds down, 21 still to come here. First race, second race of the season, first heat. Sungbin leads the men's skeleton competition. Christoph Grother of Germany last year claimed his first ever skeleton win in Altenburg in the east of Saxony. Let's see now if he can produce a run that'll challenge our runaway leader, Sungbin of Korea. Well, Yun just laid down not a great start, but a smoking run all the way down to leave everybody else 0.4 of a second behind him.
Grother comes from Oberhof, a track normally known for luge. They don't get to start there at skeleton, but it's a great learning technical track to begin on.
And there again, you see the fans leaning right over beside the track. You can get so close to the action here. These skeleton sliders, chin on the ice, 81.2 miles an hour. This is very good speed.
But he's up 0.4 from Sungbin, so he's battling for that very distant second place.
Yeah, but the group behind is so close, he's going to be in front of all of them or behind all of them. And at the moment, only 6th place on the splits. I say only, but that's still in front of the Olympic champion, Alexander Tretyakov. And he's behind his teammate, Axel Jungk, by 1/100th of a second. Again, we talked about sliders maybe not keeping their place on the team, maybe getting subbed out if they have a bad season. When you go to the games, if you're the best German in the points, you get the top German start draw, and that's really important.
A coveted position indeed. Now this German team is so tight, like you said. There's the added anxiety of getting pulled out. A great start there for Grother.
I rarely see Christopher Grother smile. Even when he's won a race, he looks a bit bashful and sheepish. Next up, the USA's Matt Antoine, bronze medalist here in 2013-14 season, and that's his only World Cup medal on the track. Zach Bland, his coach, has 2 wins. Eric Bonotis, the head of the English program, he's got 2 silver medals here.
Now, Matt didn't have the result that he had hoped for in Lake Placid, and this week for him has been about testing equipment and getting his confidence back.
He's the only US slider to have claimed a medal here in the last 9 races. 4.69, that's a decent getaway. It's not going to challenge Sungbin unless he can really drive himself into form.
Beautiful line into 4 for Matt Antoine. He is an absolute student of this sport in the total package. His work ethic, everything comes together for Matt Antoine. He is a medal contender.
8th fastest at the start. He said he's come into this season fitter than he has in the entire Olympic quad.
Big skid in a curve 11 there, that's going to hurt him. But a nice line in a 12. Now, home track advantage, the reason it's such an advantage, he's really far back, 6,800.
Yeah, only in 8th position, but then, you know, it's 4 tenths first to second, so empirically it's not such a bad run as it looks. It's always, when you follow Martins Dukurs or Alexander Tretyakov, normally you look like you're also Rans, because they tend to be so far ahead, and Sungbin is doing that now to everybody.
Right, it's all relative. He's currently 200ths behind Tretyakov.
And normally, again, on any other day of the year, don't forget, Tretyakov has had 3 wins in 6 trips to this track.
And the tough thing that Matt's going to have to come to terms with is how bad Tretyakov's run was and to come down behind him. I know he's getting a bit wrapped up in equipment decisions right now, and as he comes into 11 late like we talked about before, that's where he lost a bit of time.
It's the guesswork of a very different ice sheet to the one that you trained on. That's the problem. It's going to be a problem too for Martins Dukurs, our World Cup points leader and our world champion. A man with 2 Olympic silver medals. He had his heart broken in Vancouver when he was the favourite by John Montgomery, who came from behind to snatch the gold. He had his heart broken in Sochi by Alexander Tretyakov. And is Sungbin going to do the same for a 3rd time when we get to Pyeongchang in February?
Struggling at the top portion of the track, so your equipment choice is really going to show up there where you have low speed and it's easier to skid.
Thomas Dukurs looked pretty much in control. He's 2nd at the moment, and Martins is comfortably ahead, but he's a 1/4 second back on Sungbin.
But this is so much more work than you usually see Martins doing. He's really struggling to maintain control of his setup here.
Well, they spent the first half of last year with different runner setups, different sleds, trying all sorts of weird and wonderful things to get an Olympic season set up, but guaranteed he and Thomas and his father Dennis are still working on getting the balance right.
And especially if you're a Dukurs brother, you dominated the sport for so long. There's an entire season here building up to his most important event. All he wants is that gold medal.
Well, he won last time out, so the law of averages says that Tretyakov should win this, but he ain't going to.
So look at that shuffle. You never see that out of Martins Dukurs. He's so uncomfortable there trying to get composure back in the top portion. A hit uphill, you can't see from this angle, but it is really steep. That hurt him further.
I think World Cup win number 50 is going to have to wait at least another week. They're talking cricket about the nervous 90s, trying to get a century. He's in the nervous 49s. Martins Dukurs is down. Matthias Guggenberger is next up. 9th last week. Really strong start to the season. Let's see if he can repeat that feat here.
Now that was one of Guggenberger's best finishes in recent years. I know he's struggled to maintain health in his push, and I understand from his physio Karen that he had a great offseason this year. They focused really hard on nutrition and dieting, which when you've been sliding this long, those are the small details that you have control over.
He came back from Pyeongchang and had surgery immediately in Austria on his knee, and in fact Thomas Dukurs was due to have the same, and they had a quick chat, and Thomas Dukurs had the same op in the same hospital, and they recuperated together, obviously racing each other around the garden on crutches and all of that. But he says, yes, better than he's felt in the better part of 7 or 8 seasons.
He's 6,300ths back, and one of the stressors of that, though, is instead of having a normal training off season, it's a rehab season, and that adds a lot of anxiety to your Olympic operation.
But he's up into 11th spot off a 12th start. So is he going to be in front? 8th! That's a really good bottom part of the track.
A great place for Guggenberger.
Now, it was a disaster for his girlfriend and teammate Janine Flock in the women's race. She was bumped out of the second heat. She did not make it through. Janine won last week, going away by a country mile in Lake Placid, doesn't make the second heat. However, Gugi is ahead of Tretyakov and Matt, who's tied with Tretyakov, ahead of Matt Antoine, so he will make the second heat. 8th fastest at the moment.
I'd be curious if he went with the same setup, but as the day gets warmer, that helped him out.
Now here's a story, 7th in the World Cup rankings on his 2nd ever appearance. This is Wang Zhenggeng of China. We met him in the World Championships last year. So we met him there in Koenigsegg. His first World Cup race was in Lake Placid. He was 7th. 21st in the World Championships. We were impressed by a rookie who'd never been to Koenigsegg. 7th in Lake Placid.
That was one of the more delightful things to see this season, to see someone come out of nowhere with so little experience. He's coached by Jeff Payne, Canadian Olympian and one of the dominant athletes from this sport.
Silver medalist in the men's skeleton competition behind Duff Gibson.
Now, Jeff was supposed to, part of his contract with China is he was supposed to earn 2 World Cup spots. So it was a little bit iffy on him fulfilling that with only 1 athlete on this tour, but it helps that he did so well last week.
And look at the form. Again, you know, another long, lean athlete. You're looking Matt Antoine, Gregor Staley, you know, the classic long, lean, aerodynamic form. 12th at the start, 13th place.
An extremely quick orientation to the sport as he's going to come across the line, maybe the top 10 here.
And he's across the line in 12th place, so he's ahead of Jack Thomas by 1400ths of a second, and that might be enough to earn himself a second run.
All things considered, just kept hitting early, late into corners and scrub speed down.
Well, there's on the IBSF Facebook page, really interesting little interview with him. He's such a quietly spoken young man. Sungbin Jung is the runaway leader here. Everybody else log-jammed behind him, but the Korean has a big advantage. 15 of our 31 sliders have completed a first heat here in Park City, Utah. Martin Haven and Bree Schaff alongside me. And this is the young Russian rookie this season, his 2nd ever World Cup start, Vladislav Marchenkov. We met him first last week in Lake Placid,
where he surprised the field. He jumped up from a really late start bib to be right in the mix.
Absolutely right. And Marchenkov, 16th place on his debut, 12th at the start. And again, the Russians aren't going to put anybody into the program who can't get away like the Clappers.
Oh, a little bit late in the 4 here. That's going to hurt him as he's trying to set himself up. He just looks a bit uncomfortable. This is, of course, his first time on the Park City track.
And of course, the Russians don't come often to North America on their development cycles.
No, struggling in the labyrinth here as he's hitting early take-ons and a big skid in the curve 11. All right, so one of the more interesting pieces of information I got from his coach Sergey on this flight is that Vladislav is a competitive ballroom dancer that he started dancing with his twin sister. Nice.
Vladislav Twinkle Toes Marchenkov, he's in 14th place and comes across the line in 14th ahead of Reece and Alex Hanson, and that is going to leave him in the drop zone. 10th of a second behind Great Britain's Jack Thomas. Don't forget, only the fastest 20 of 31 starters will go through into the second heat. So Marchenkov in the danger zone. And puffing and blowing like everybody does at these 2,500 meters of altitude.
So watch his shoulders bounce on the sled. Ideally, the shoulders maintain contact the entire time. That means he's just a little bit tight here as we see him hit and take on. That means it pushes him late into the corner.
Just 21 years old, and to be in the World Cup squad, that is an excellent performing athlete. Next up, Dom Parsons for Great Britain. Girlfriend Jackie Narricott has a searing first run in the women's skeleton competition, possibly one of the best of her career. Let's see what Dom Parsons can produce for Team GB.
Now, normally, you don't have an alternating race like this, and I wonder how that adds to her anxiety now, able to watch her boyfriend slide in his race while she's still trying to prepare for her second run.
Well, her first heat, if that doesn't calm her nerves and give her the confidence, I don't know what does other than a shot of cortisone.
So Dom is an extremely intelligent athlete, and the plight of an intelligent athlete in skeleton is to overcome that intelligence, to just let it go and relax and let your body's intuition take over. He's been sliding long enough that he can follow that intuition down the track.
His only World Cup medal to date came in Calgary in Canada 3 or 4 seasons ago.
He's slightly skiddy coming down, 6,300s behind the pace right now.
But he's getting a good drive in, and this is sort of the opposite of Lake Placid where it went away from him. Here he's coming in from 14th into the top 10 though. Drifts away at the bottom of the track to 12th, but on the splits midway down, he was up to 8th position. However, that should see him into the second heat, so I think he and Jackie can both breathe a sigh of relief. They're both on Bromley sleds, and he might just have a little conference with Kristen Bromley and with his girlfriend Jackie Narricott to see what she had and why it worked compared to what he's got and why it didn't so much at the high-speed portion of the track.
The interesting thing about a Bromley sled is that all the pieces are interchangeable. So if you're intelligent, you have the potential to really overthink your setup.
Next up, Dave Cheshin of Canada. The man they call Grizz, because it's an awful lot easier to say. And again, fabulous sled art. And one of two grizzly bear helmets in the Canadian team, which is just a photographer's delight, because when he's coming towards you, that's what you see.
His nickname is Old Man Grizz, according to, I would say, everyone, but that came directly from Charles Bullercheck. He just got married this summer.
Yeah, so not so old.
No, but I noticed, a little bit early on a curve 3 there, but he's got more experience, this being a North American track and coming from Canada.
It's funny, sometimes you think, yeah, the Canadians will have been here all their life, and yet Park City doesn't get used quite as much as you think, because Intercontinental Cup doesn't often come here, and a lot of the sliders don't spend too many years on North America's Cup. No,
and Lake Placid is a North American track that a lot of the internationals get plenty of ice time on.
And it's always open early and late, so there's lots of training there. Now, he was 12th at the start, he's up to 11th on the splits, aiming for a top 10 run, in 10th place at the moment, ahead of Matt Antoine. Now chasing Alexander Tretyakov, 11th. Okay, take that. 400s behind.
Him a second run.
400s behind Matt Antoine, 400s out of the top 10 at the moment. And that'll be a change from Lake Placid.
It is a really tough track to transition to from Lake Placid. It's hard to dial back your steers and just relax and go. That's the uphill portion. You can't tell from this angle, but it is so steep. So as he's touching his feet to stay straight, it's very slightly slowing him down.
Best result for Grizz last year in the World Cup, 11th in Whistler. Hey, guess where we're going next week?
Ooh, Whistler.
And talking of which, here's a man from the west coast of Canada. That's the native art on the helmet, the native beaver, the Canadian maple leaf in all its full glory. That probably needs frosting over now. And everybody's major sponsor, mum and dad, Bank of. They're the ones that bankroll all these young athletes. So Kevin Boyer is our 19th of 31 starters. And he needs to put half a dozen behind him. It's not about catching Sungbin, but a 4:65 getaway, 6th fastest in the field. For Schoolboyer, this could be a good run.
Now he has a lot of talent, a lot of potential. He's only been sliding 5 years. Last year was his first year on World Cup, so he is a sponge. He's just trying to soak it up and learn as much as he can as the Olympics loom in the background.
Great speed at the bottom, 81.1. That's not far off Sungbin, and he's still in the top 5. Now that drift up against the wall and that hit.
12, that's going to hurt. That's going to set him off going into 13 here. 5300's back.
That follows him all the way down the track. He was 5th. He's out to 8th place on the splits. He'll be in the head. Oh, look at his head right down. Helmet dragging on the ice, wild out of the final corner.
Almost a victory roll coming out of curve 15 there.
300ths of a second slower than teammate Dukurs Cheshin, but 2 spots back. He's 13th. Grizz is tied with Ander Mirambel in 11th.
You have to appreciate them just owning it with the mom and dad sponsorship there. That's a hit going into curve.
Oof.
Yes, going into curve 12, and it sets you off your line. If you can get into that curve early, it's really easy. But if you take that early hit, it puts you late, and you have to steer really hard, and that slows you down.
There's 200 pounds odd of him, and he bounced off the sled. That's how much energy goes into the wall with those hits. Next up for Great Britain is our 20th slider. So after Jerry Rice, the race will be full, and then it's bump someone to get in.
Now, word on the street is that there's an American football player named Jerry Rice.
Well, he's only called Jeremy when he's done something wrong. So far this season, he's Jerry. And I believe that they're now working. Coach Eric Bonotas in the background there is going to get the name changed. It is his official Christian name, but I don't think he's ever been called that since he left primary school.
Now, Jerry, I understand, is a bit of a wild card. He comes from rugby, so then that's no surprise. But a rugby athlete is going to be able to take these hits, take these beatings, and keep on ticking. More so than I would say any other sport to transition into skeleton.
Another great example is Dukurs Cheshin. You know, built like a rugby player, looks like a rugby player.
Not phased by the hits and the punching bag that a skeleton run can incur.
Ooh, slipping away. Was 13th at the start, drifting out into 16th position. So battling with teammate Jack Thomas. Now, if they tie together, they'll either both be in or both be out, up to 15th. So he's ahead of China's Wang Zhanggang, 16th place. He's just behind him, and in the little fallow patch between the Chinese athlete and teammate Jack Thomas. So Jerry Rice, World Cup debut season, He made his World Cup debut back in Koenigsegg last year, but this is his first season on tour.
He'll definitely be riding that border.
Yeah.
Great load there onto the sled, but something to watch for. His form is great right there, but now as we see the replays come, oh, I really wanted to pick on his form because as the run progressed, his head came up higher and higher, and that was just a big sail cutting down his aerodynamics.
Experience counts when the ice changes. Sungbin and the Dukurs brothers have plenty of it. There are leaders. 20 sleds down, 11 to go, and everybody now in the dog-eat-dog world of skeleton. It's go fast or go home. First up, Barrett Martineau, another grizzly bear, Martineau. Now another good quick starter, but he needs a good drive to get in.
13th place start. Another athlete that comes from ski jumping, as we talked about, a very explosive sport. Too early on a curve 3, already he's off his rhythm and skidding into curve 4.
Yeah, he hoped to qualify for the Canadian team for the games in Vancouver. In fact, he was one of the 4 jumpers for the Olympic competition. Same way that we have 4 runners to open the track here.
He's just looking uncomfortable as he makes his way down.
This is a sticky run. He's in 19th on the splits. On the bubble is Alex Hanson of Norway.
Working hard to get off curve 11 there. We saw his foot come up as he steered to catch that second pressure.
Well, he's going to be in front of Hanson. Who else will he depose? He's up into 18th on the splits. That's not enough to guarantee a spot. 16th, that might be. Had a good last couple of corners.
He found some time there in the sneaky bottom portion.
Sneaks in front of Jerry Rice by 200, so he's in 16th, 4 behind him, and Alex Hansen gets the drop. There's Dennis Dukurs, as always, with words of advice and help for the athletes.
His right shoulder comes off the sled, and his sled, you rarely see someone visibly steering so much in skeleton, but that's how important it is to get those lines at the top.
Well, we always say you steer this with head, shoulders, knees and toes, and you saw all of them employed there.
An infinite amount of ways to steer a skeleton sled.
Well, next up, the all-time and to many reigning hair champion of men's skeleton, John Daly of the USA, came back to the sport last year after walking away heartbroken in Sochi, deciding that he was not done with the Olympics. Give it one more try.
John retired and went into medical device sales, and he was really successful, even taking over a management position, but he's just been tortured by that run in the 2014 games.
Yeah, and he wants to go back one more time and just set it all to rights. Win, lose or draw, at least he gets to give it another go. So he was on the North America's Cup and ICC trail last autumn. He'd leave the office on Thursday night, go race, go back to the office on Monday morning and try and fit in a whole week's work, as well as being a full-time athlete.
He's already 8,200s back. His run does not look that bad, but his start hurt him a bit, and then taking a hit going uphill.
15th place on the splits, and a wild last corner, but he's in 15th, and that should put him into the race, and that cuts Riek Graf of Switzerland. He joins Alex Hansen on the sidelines. Russia's Vladislav Marchenkov is in 20th. 19th, Jack Thomas. 18th, Jerry Rice. Neither of them are safe either.
So much of this sport is about rhythm and momentum, and it's very tough to come back after years off. And he might have all the skill. It's still there. It's still in him. He has so much experience, but the anxiety of wondering what you missed can make it harder.
Late change in the Korean lineup. We were due to see Junghyun Kim, who started last week in Lake Placid. Instead, it's Jisoo Kim, making his World Cup debut for the season. Richard Bromley, the coach there, who builds the sleds and trains the sliders.
And Richard has to send out a happy birthday message to Stacy and Ethan, who are watching at home.
I'm sorry, we don't have time for that. Jisoo Kim then, let's see what he's got. His teammate Sungbin Young is our race leader. And Young off an epic 4:51 start. 4:58.
Wow!
Second fastest in the competition. I can't imagine how he got onto the team, especially at a starter's track like this. Now let's see if he can hold it together down the ice.
They have done an incredible job recruiting for this sport. I mean, Home Olympics is a huge advantage, and man, has their recruiting tour paid off. Oh, slopping off a corner there. He's going to be bleeding time a bit. He did long jump before skeleton, so that explains his start. We talked about the jumpers, super explosive. Great line going into curve 12.
In 4th place, he is challenging for a medal, slipping away a little to 8th, but hang on a minute, anything at this stage
Half
is
a second
epic.
back, but it is tight in that field.
23 years old, he has raced on the track before. Wow.
A top 10, I mean, that is a great place to be. I mean, he is a great starter, and what I love is it sounds like he's a little bit of a nerd. He likes to read a lot in his spare time. It's amazing that just the personalities in this sport are so fascinating.
He raced in Eagles last year and in Pyeongchang, missed the cut in Eagles, 16th in Pyeongchang, 10th here. Wow.
Great low heel recovery. That was all power, just propelling the sled forward. Little bit of a skid, that toe on the ice, that is, the skeleton is about keeping the sled straight. And until I started coaching, it's surprisingly hard to do. A lot of people don't have that intuition.
Germany's Alexander Gassner, the 3rd of their athletes. 18th last week in Lake Placid, looking to bump at the moment. Jack Thomas out of the race. We've already lost Vladislav Marchenkov, Reece, and Alex Hanson.
All right, a 470 start, 13th place start for Gastner. He is the most experienced and oldest member of this German team.
And he spent a couple of years away from World Cup racing, earned his spot back last year, came back in healthy and fast, and actually went out and claimed his first ever World Cup medals as well. Bronze in a race in Koenigsegg before the World Championships.
He's having a beautiful looking run, but the question is his sled setup too highly controlled? Is he cutting too much ice to get these perfect lines?
Well, he's 13th at the start. He's currently 13th on the splits. He's up to 11th position. If it is cutting too much ice, that might have been the way to go. Look at the form.
Just a beautiful run, but he's going to be a little bit farther back here.
8th place!
He found time. That is the product of that, keeping that velocity going. If you can have a nice clean run, especially at the top, you build up immunity to leave room for mistakes, which he didn't even make.
Got a team medal in the World Championships with the Romanian bobsled team. He was one of the sliders in a mixed nations team, and actually, ironically, he could have been an almost all Romanian team because his family heritage is from a German-speaking part of Romania. Pretty much the same as Billy Schneider, in fact, who has been so long a skeleton athlete and coach. And another stunning helmet livery. This is Italy's Joe Cecchini, struggling with a double hernia. And former Canadian slider Michela Wigmer with the sled. And he's the only Italian who's even halfway fit, and he's not even halfway fit, Joe. Mattia Gaspari, his younger teammate back home in Italy, tore his Achilles in the start house in Cesana in their team trials.
Brutal injury to try and recover from.
Well, he's already said he's out for the Olympics, so Joe Cecchini with a double hernia that he's trying to recover from as he competes.
Joe is a police officer that actually bought, a little bit high in 6th there. He bought a bunch of acreage and built a barn, and that's the gym that he trains out of, in his own barn.
Yep, full-time Calgary cop. And actually, the way he works things in and out, it's like Duff Gibson going back to the fire station in between races. He has very understanding bosses, but boy, he has to get the hours in on the beat. 23rd spot off the 15th start.
Head touching the ice going up the straightaway. That's interesting, trying to tuck in an aerodynamic form. I don't think he's going to get a second run, though. Nope, 1.44 seconds back. That is going to be it today for
The
Joe.
encouragement, though, is a 4:72 start, 15th. So he's starting to get some of that speed back at the start, but he is definitely fighting very wounded.
It adds so much strain to your season knowing what you're capable and being held back by an injury like that, especially in the most high-pressure season there is, the Olympic.
20th place, Jerry Rice, still in the drop zone, so is 19th Barrett Martineau. Greg West of the USA is up. He was calling the women's race last week, just gobsmacked at the speed of Elena Nikitina, who left the start record at 5:01.
And outpushed him.
Yeah, and he said in team trials in Lake Placid, he did a Nikita did 5:03, he did a 5:01.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Sorry, apologies, Greg.
Well, no, in the race, he didn't match a 5:03 in either start. Well, let's see what he can produce here. Again, needs a big start, but needs a really good drive to get into the field.
Greg has one of the most interesting starts in skeleton that he developed all on his own. Just fingertips on that sled to try and give him more room to drive his legs and knees forward.
Well, he claimed that Lake Placid was his first official full-time World Cup start, because his other appearances have been when somebody else has been bumped or not fit to race.
Right. Greg came out and crushed the U.S. team trials this year, and he largely attributes that to changing his nutrition in the summer and really buckling down, doing whatever it took to improve.
Well, that's the only way to go into an Olympic season, into any season as an athlete, is 100% commitment or nothing. 17th place off 22nd at the start.
This is home track. We're going to see what he can do.
He's in the race ahead of John Daly. He is ahead of John Daly by 0.03 of a second. He's in. And Jack Thomas is out, Jerry Rice is out, and Barrett Martineau of Canada is on the bubble.
John and Greg were really tight last week as well, but unfortunately position neither of them want to be in. They expect to be top 10. That's what you're here for, especially on a home track. All right, his fingertips here. This is so fascinating. He, at one point, had a piece of metal as he was trying to get more stable with that start on the sled. What that allows is for a farther knee drive and a longer stride for acceleration.
What it does mean is it's fractionally more risky that the sled's going to pop the groove. Well, he's in at the moment. 26 sleds down, 5 to go here. Next up is John Farrow. Can the Aussie make the race? He did in Lake Placid in a 28 sled field. Can he do it again? Possibly the strongest he's been in about 6 or 7 seasons.
44 start, not a great start, but John has so much experience. He's part of this Emerging Nations program coached by Rob Durman. And he's an athlete that struggles with his energy going elsewhere because he is such a leader and he's constantly sacrificing himself to help others, namely his team.
Australian Sport Institute and their National Olympic Committee supported women's skeleton very strongly as a way of getting quick results in Olympic sports, but the men didn't really have much representation. John's been pretty much doing it all himself for the last half dozen years.
And now they have a field of about 6 Australian athletes doing skeleton.
And now he's in the race in 20th place. He's in 18th. All right, so he is in and he bumps out Barrett Martineau of Canada. So he is in at the moment. And there are 4 to go. Oh, it's gonna be
It's
tough.
gonna be so close. This is the heartbreaker, seeing who's gonna get a second heat here.
And one of them is his own teammate.
He's got a new baby at home in Oregon where he lives now.
Yep.
He was just there visiting before he came back to this World Cup.
4 athletes to go, and on the bubble is Wencheng of China, and the man to bump him could be Hiro Takahashi of Japan. Hiro looking very relaxed at breakfast in our hotel this morning. And again, lots of work going on with Kyle Tress, their coach. He's really sort of changing the way they go about on and off track.
Now Hiro is a big baseball fan, and one of my favorite parts, I actually got to race the World Cup in Nagano, and we got into a snowball fight with the track workers there, and they just demolished us because they're all so good at baseball.
Massive sport in Japan. So to leave that and come to the, well, let's say backwater to be generous, in terms of Japanese knowledge of skeleton, is quite a big change for him.
Now, what Kyle Tress had to say about Hiro is that he has so much experience that when something clicks, it is locked down, it is permanent. So when he fixes something in the track, that is now checked off the list. He will do it correct every time.
17th at the start, drifted out to 22nd early on, but he's closing in on a spot in the race. 21st place on the split times. It's either him or Wencheng of China. He's in at the moment, up to 20th. And across the line.
Oh, 21st.
And that,
1.08 back.
yeah, he ties with Barrett Martineau, 400th of a second out of the race.
Oh, that's gutting. But still, this is a climb, and they've not been working with Kyle Trest that long. And I have a feeling that Kyle, even though he's struggled in these recent years of sliding, he has so much to give back to the sport. And what better team to receive that than the Japanese team?
Well, 2 or 3 years ago, Hiro was just around the top 10. Last year, he struggled at the bottom of the top 20.
Look at his form there, his chin nearly dragging on the ice. That's something the athletes I coach them constantly telling them, you should have your chin just a millimeter off. That's perfect aerodynamics right there.
Hey, guess what nation this sled is from? Well done. It's not from the Vatican. Swiss cards from Switzerland on the sled of Ronald Auderset, 29th of our 31 starters. Look at his legs. Can you see why his nickname is the Quads? And another quick getaway, 464.
Seventh place, that's a good place to begin this run. Nice and late into 2. The reason you want to go in late is it makes it only 1 oscillation. If you bump on early, you hit 2 little bumps that slow you down.
Nice from 3 to 4.
Ooh, getting super uncomfortable as he goes into curve 6. We saw his shoulders coming off the sled.
Yeah, you got to sort of squish your shoulders down to let the air flow over your back.
And that is, it takes so much diligence, Martin, to keep those shoulders down because everything in your body is saying, Mayday, Mayday, panic, this is not normal, I should not be doing this.
This is going very rapidly south. Ooh, 7th at the start,
really
he's
high
already 26, 27th. This is going to be the slowest run of the day. It's not, but it's way down there. 27th spot from Ronald Auderset.
Just above his teammate, Reece.
Yeah, very disappointing for him. A 50.58 slide. 7th fastest start, 27th at the bottom.
If we could only combine these 2 athletes, he and his teammate.
Yeah.
With that start,
well, there
it's
are
just going to be tough.
No lets in this, particularly in such a big field.
So those shoulders, they should be touching the sled. We can see air beneath. That's all anxiety that we're seeing. He needs to have those shoulders down, feet together, really bad uphill portion there.
And this is all part of the ice being so different from training. The speeds are wrong, the steers are in the wrong place, and they're all scrambling for control. One of twin brothers, Nick and Dean Timmings, both have slid in the World Cup for Australia, and it's Nick who gets their 2nd World Cup spot at the early part of the season. Both from Perth in Western Australia, went to school with Formula 1 driver Daniel Ricciardo.
So the Australians are splitting these races in a really interesting way. And for the Timmings brothers, it's very important to them. They want so badly to go to the Olympics together that they're willing to divide up these races and divide the points.
Well, they, like Jane Channel, come from mixed Japanese and English-speaking parentage, so they're both fluent in Japanese.
Yeah, it's always a bit startling when you hear them speaking with the Japanese team in a race.
9200s back, 28th place. And unless he finds a shortcut down at the bottom.
Oh, really high into curve 14. We saw him shoot to the roof. When you go in late to a corner, the G-force hits you all at once, and no matter how hard you steer, you're going to shoot up.
So 27 spot, 50.38. That's 0.2 of a second quicker than Ronald Auderset, but not enough to get him into the heat.
Tough run there for Nick Timmings. Now these guys were taken under the wing of John Farrow, as we spoke about earlier, being so generous with trying to get the Australian program going, especially on the men's side. Like you said, the women have gotten so much support for so long. Now the men are finally starting to come along. I had 4 of those athletes that I was coaching on NAC last week.
And our final slider is Vladislav Marchenkov from the Ukraine. His coach is his father, and new to the World Cup this season. First met him in the World Championships in Koenigsegg, Bavaria in February. And another young man who's got an awful lot of learning to do on these tracks.
Now, I understand that he comes from boxing, which oddly does cater to this sport, because really, skeleton is about jumping on a sled and then you're getting punched in the face about 15 times on the way down consistently. So if anyone can take a punch, it's him.
Well, he needs a little bit more fancy footwork. Slowest start of the field, 4.90. And again, with so little experience on this track anyway, the totally different ice today, so much faster than in training, is going to really play tricks with his mind.
It is. He's a physics student in university, and that combined with his boxing makes a pretty ideal skeleton athlete, I would say. A greater understanding of the G-forces and manipulation of those forces, but he's still got a lot to learn, like you said.
Creeping ahead of Alex Hanson. In fact, he's up into 27th place, ahead of the Swiss and Nick Timmings, 25th position. Good run from Vladislav Marchenkov.
Whoa,
20th place!
He just bumps Gang Wenjiang out of the mix.
He
Wow!
is the last man down, and he grabs the final spot in the race from the 31st start. He drives himself into 20th place. He is in, and he's going to have to look again at that scoreboard. Dennis Dukurs will tell him he's in the second heat. And Gang of China, who was 7th last week in Lake Placid, is out. And the form wasn't perfect, but it was good.
No, but he is a big kid, and that's going to help him out. I understand he's quite a beast in the gym as well.
He carries
such a bright future.
Carries a lot of mass, and mass is your friend. Carrying a lot of mass and a lot of speed and plenty of experiences. Sungbin Jung of Korea, 1 medal on this track, silver in the World Cup 2 years ago. And he leads by a country mile, 3/10 ahead of Martin Dukurs, 4/10 ahead of Thomas Dukurs, and 4600ths ahead of Nikita Tretyakov in 4th. Well, a huge story for Sungbin Jung of Korea with that big advantage, but again, look at the huge story of the man who's in 5th place. First out of the start shed, but that wasn't why Reece Thornbury was so quick. He was just so quick.
The race of his life.
Could well be the result of his career. A tie for 11th, a tie for 9th, a tie for 13th, a tie for 15th, and that's so on down the order. 20th place, last gasp, Vladislav Marchenkov gets into the race, and 11 athletes, starting with Wenquang Zheng, go home without a second slide, including 2 of our 3 British sliders, and athletes from Norway and all other points west. That's the first of 2 heats in the Men's Skeleton World Cup. The second comes up in a little over an hour to decide the medals here in Park City. Stay with us.